We hope today to be able to cover the following learning goals. We want you to be able to identify assignments that are best for group work and be able to determine which ones might not be best to use. We'll brainstorm together some strategies for creating equitable groups, both short and long term. And we'll go over what defines short and long term. And we'll identify specific strategies for organizing those groups, which can be difficult. We'll also go over best practices for managing the groups so that they can be successful, and we'll briefly touch on assessment practices, but we probably won't have a lot of time to go in depth with assessing. So Siva is going to take it away and introduce why we want to use group work.
Thank you, Caroline. So as my wonderful colleagues Elizabeth and Caroline said, this workshop today is about managing groups. And I can hear so many of you think, but students hate group works, and managing group work is really difficult in any environment, whether it is in person or online. So why would I put myself through that experience? Why do we use group work? Well, research studies showed that students learn best when they're actively engaged in the learning process. And group work is a very effective learning strategies to engage students. Group work helps students develop higher order thinking skills, communication skills, so students learn how to communicate and collaborate respectively. It helps them learn self-management and leadership skills, and we're going to be talking about making sure that you assign roles in your group projects. Also, group work helps build community and promote student-faculty interaction. So they contact you, discuss with you their ideas, and consult with you as needed. And you, as an instructor, can monitor their work and provide feedback to improve their learning experiences. We know from the research as well that group work helps increase student retention, self-esteem, and responsibility, especially for those students coming from underserved population. It also exposes students to diverse perspectives and different ways that they can approach problems in their field. And lastly, it prepares them for real life situation where they have to work closely with other people, even with the people that they don't agree with, or those people who are difficult to work with. So figuring out all of these skills now really gonna benefit them in the future. And in this session, we're gonna explore what is group work exactly and how we're gonna form groups.
So we're going to talk about like the first step, forming your groups.
Right, so I heard really awesome ideas here, but there are a few considerations and tips to form groups. And the first one, as you're assigning group project or group work, you want to make sure to keep the learning outcomes in mind. So you want to make sure the group project is aligned with the course objectives, with the course outcomes. And here's a list of questions to think about when you want to design or form groups. The first one is, how is this group structure facilitating my learning goals? In other words, how will the overall goal of the project is going to be furthered by asking students to work in groups? There's maybe some of the tasks that are not well suited to be group projects. Is the task complex enough? So there is enough work for everyone to do, and how to scaffold and break up the task into stages. Is there enough time in the course schedule to do group projects effectively? What instruction, support, and assessment criteria to provide? Because a big part of setting successful group work is making sure that you're having really clear and explicit directions. And I heard this from many of you here. A clear agenda and having ways for student to get support. And you will be also, you need to be really open and transparent about your grading and grading criteria that you will use. The next thing that I recommend is to consider focusing on interaction and experience in group work, not just the product. A big part of having this group project is to learn to work in groups. So learning to work together, building a community and engagement with one another. This is our aim when we assign a group project. We want to make sure that this is reflected in the way we are thinking about our group project and how we structure them. We want to also keep our groups manageable. You can design groups of 3 to 6 members, but the research says groups of 4 to 5 members typically work best. And this will be much easier for them to manage and schedule meeting, maybe smaller groups of 3 to 4 also in the online environment, I would say. Larger groups decrease the opportunity for participations, and some member may become passive observers. The next thing that I would suggest to consider is to assign roles and to make it clear who does what and when, who's gonna, for example, do the work, who's gonna be the timer, who's gonna take notes, who's gonna post the assignment. I would suggest also requiring a group plan and group contract as part of the group project. So have a plan with deadline, with communication plan, like how they're gonna communicate with one another, which tool they're gonna use to communicate with one another, how they're gonna interact with one another and resolve any conflict, and when they need to contact you. The last thing here is you wanna think about the group types, or we would say the group longevity. Do you want to form permanent groups who will work together throughout the semester, or short-term groups to work on one single assignment, and how you're gonna create inclusive and equitable groups? And my colleague Caroline will explain more on how to create these types of groups.
Thank you, Siva. Before I go over the different types of groups, if you want to, before we go into the next active part of this, if you want to mute your video, that's totally fine. And also, I saw a couple of you taking notes. I want to let you know we'll share slides as well, if that's helpful. So for the two different types of groups, you can use the term informal or structured, or you can use the term short-term or long-term. If it's informal, it's going to be a group that you form very quickly, maybe just for one class session, or maybe just one brief activity within a class session. Maybe it's just 10 minutes of your class that you're spending on a group activity. Typically, if you're forming a short-term group, they're only going to meet once. So it's going to be something that lives within one class session. And then for a long-term group, this is something more structured. This is more, these are groups where you might want to think about who you're placing in groups and who's working together. They're longer-term activities, larger projects. The groups meet repeatedly to accomplish whatever the task is. So to decide which one of these you want to use, you really have to examine what you're trying to accomplish. So if your learning goal is something that can easily be accomplished by one singular student, students are going to be less motivated to work with team members, because that is more work for them to manage different working styles, to manage their calendars and when they can meet. And that's where some of the frustration can come in from the students, is wondering why they can't just do that themselves. Where you're going to increase motivation is when you choose a group activity that's going to meet a goal that they can't accomplish by themselves, or one where they're grateful for support. So 2 examples, we're going to show you a group assignment description from a professor here at the University of Michigan. And that assignment description asks students to use audio. It asks them for a writing component. It asks them for a video component. It asks them for a lot of different components for this project. And that is a really great best practice because the students need to diversify their roles in order to accomplish it. And they're going to appreciate the fact that they have their peer support. Another example where maybe the task you're asking them to do isn't as complicated, but they would need a group, is for a learning goal about examining diverse perspectives on a topic. They can't do this on their own. They need to have the support of their peers in order to accomplish that learning goal. So this might involve them doing an individual component that they come prepared to present to their group. They're all sharing in some way so that they can analyze diverse perspectives on a topic. And then there might be a deliverable at the end so that you can ensure accountability. But those are 2 examples of a learning goal that's going to increase motivation for students. So this is just basically a step-by-step of what I just summarized, is knowing the learning goal that's going to best it's going to be best for a collaborative assignment, and then selecting an appropriate activity, and then planning whether that can be accomplished with a short-term or a long-term group. The second example I gave might be perfect for a short-term group. They come prepared with their reflection, they have a group activity within class, and then they have something they turn in individually afterward. So long-term groups.
All right, so forming long-term groups can be tricky a little bit here. So if you plan to create long-term structure group to work together on a group project or an activity throughout the semester, in which groups need to meet frequently to discuss and work on pieces of the project, we recommend here that as instructor to create them and make sure that they are diverse groups. This is really crucial because teams that have broad range of abilities and perspectives among members tend to be more successful. Research also suggests that working with peers of different abilities offer benefits to all the students in the class. So the high performance students become more aware of their thinking processes, while the low performance students learn from those advanced colleagues and peers in the classroom. So you want to also make sure that you form diverse groups in terms of student social identity, like, for example, their gender, race, to avoid isolating students from underrepresented identity and encourage equal participations, especially in the introductory courses where the students are new to the field. Now, how to do that? To do that, you may collect some student input to form groups, and you can do that through using surveys, maybe on paper in the classrooms or Google Forms. Other effective tools that you can use is KitMe and Tandem that have team maker features, and we're gonna go over these features and how to use these tools to help you create effective and diverse groups. And then you can input those groups in the Canvas groups. Now, I want to mention here that if you have a smaller class where students have gotten to know each other, you may give the student the opportunity to choose their peers and the people who would like to work with. But in general, the research suggested that you create the groups for long-term project groups. Now, so what tools that we can use? So I'm gonna jump in here to go in details about the tools that I mentioned here before. if you want to sort them by abilities and past performance, learning styles, Academy and Tandems are two effective tools that can help you create and build your teams. They have surveys to help you intentionally design groups based on skills, background, and personality. So Academy, it's a free tools available for all of faculty at the through the College of Engineering. And as I said, it has built-in survey to help you make your teams based on criteria that you select. Tandem is an online free tools that build at the University of Michigan Center of Academic Innovation to help students and faculty design and manage the teamwork. Basically, Tandem has three types of surveys. The one that I'm going to mention here is the one that will help you create teams based on their personalities, past experience, perspectives on the team, their working styles, including the likelihood to speak up if they prefer to speak up in groups, or if they would like to work close to a deadline. So all of those criteria will be considered when designing teams by using the survey in Tandem. I want to mention here, note about Tandem. If you decide to use this tool, please reach out to us early, at least 1 month before your assignment, to set up the groups for you. And lastly, you have groups in Canvas, and I think all of you are familiar with this tool. So if you, the group tab is available in the global navigation in your Canvas site, and once you click on it, it's gonna show you the list of all the groups that you are part of on Canvas. And I want to mention here, I want to point out to a very important note here, that to give your groups a clear descriptive name, because if the student will access the group through that tab, so they can read the name of the group, and they can know from where they're getting those notifications. So groups in Canvas provide a space like a tiny small Canvas site in which the students in the same group can send an announcement to each other, can create pages together, can upload files. And what I really like in Canvas is they can work by using collaborations tools in which they can create Google Docs together, or Office 365 Word document, or maybe a PowerPoint, and work on it together and add collaborator. To create groups in Canvas, you have the options under the People tab to create to split the group automatically, manually, or let the student sign up themselves. Next slide, please. Okay, so other free external tools such as Perusal for social annotation, Yellowdig, and Harmonize for discussions have also a feature to create groups and manage those groups throughout the semester. We won't be able to show you the steps on how to create teams with these tools, but please reach out to us if you are interested in learning the process of creating those teams.
And I'm actually going to go backwards. My slides skipped forward 2 slides, so I appreciate Siva just jumping in and being flexible. But we skipped the short-term groups. So quickly, if you're interested in forming short-term groups, if you're in an online, modality, you can use online tools to just randomly sort students into groups. So I'm sure we're all familiar at this point with Zoom breakout rooms, and there's the option to manually assign or to randomly assign. So for a short-term group, you're not going to want to spend a lot of time figuring out who should go where. Randomly assign is great for a short-term group. Those other tools that we just saw on the last slide, Yellow Dig, Perusal, the tools that you have available to you in Canvas like that, they have the option for short-term and long-term groups. So you can randomly or manually assign your groups. So depending on whatever your learning goal is, you'll be able to adjust those settings. And then a note about groups in Canvas. We just heard about Canvas groups, which is different from a group assignment. So a group assignment is much better suited to a short-term group where you can randomly assign groups to the assignment, or you can manually assign them. And then after that assignment is complete, then that group is done. But if you make a Canvas group, that's like they have their own Canvas site, as Siba mentioned. So that's more for a long-term project where they need a space to communicate and collaborate. And then for in-person strategies, for short-term groups, the goal is to be able to form these quickly and equitably. So counting off can be a great simple strategy. So if you want 4 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then ones go to their group, 2s go to theirs. I don't know a lot about your classroom space, but if you have the ability to post prompts in a room, you can tape up, for example, strongly disagree or strongly agree, and you can have students place themselves along that opinion continuum. And then depending on where they physically place themselves, you can ask them to gather in a small group and discuss. So there are some quick ways to form groups depending on your goals. You can use the areas of the room. So if you have pre-assigned students to discuss a certain question, you can post those questions up around the room so that they have a place to meet and they can see quickly who else was assigned the same question. Maybe you did that in advance on Canvas, or you can let them self-select. So there's no planning. You just have the questions and then they self-select into their group. You can use color-coded areas of a classroom if you want to put colors so that they know maybe there's a table that has green, a table that has a blue note card, and you divide them by color. You can project your seating chart and then have their names within a color-coded area that corresponds to, for example, a blue card on a table. The main thing here that we're trying to communicate is that you want to avoid telling students to choose a partner or choose a group. This can leave students who are maybe combating some power dynamics within the classroom to feel unsafe, or to feel like to hesitate putting themselves out there and trying to choose a partner to join a group. So as much as you can do to have some sort of quick structure so that students know where to go, that's going to really help those groups feel more equitable to students. So we're going to talk about organizing long-term groups, and hopefully some of this will be helpful. Carla, I know you mentioned wanting new ways to form those groups and organize them, and that's less tedious and involves more guesswork for you.
All right, so I think let's mention a little bit, since they spoke about some of the best practices to organizing teams. And I want to mention, like, here, just a few tips. I think the slides before this one here, before we'll jump into the tools that you can use. So organizing your teams before that, I think, right? Or let's go.
Yep, my slides are jumping.
Or yeah, here. Okay, so organizing the team. So in case you want to now, you form the teams and you know that each team has maybe 4 to 5 members. And now I want to organize those teams to work effectively. So here are some few tips before we'll speak about the tools that you can use to organize those teams. The first one is to make the assignment clear, to make the agenda or maybe the description, the prompt of the assignment clear, and share it with your students. And try to make it to link it to the objectives of the course, and also maybe to to their future. So it's gonna, they feel that encouragement and incentive to complete that assignment. We mentioned how to scaffold the assignment and how to break it up into stages and try to monitor and provide feedback to students. So to organize good teamwork, you need to think about how you're gonna also monitor and provide feedback to students. And this can be short meetings every week with the student, or ask them to submit some a summary of their work, or maybe a document of what they've done during the week. Another really a good practice to provide opportunity to develop rapport and connections with one another. And we demonstrated that today in those activities, in the first activities in which we provided opportunity for you to introduce yourself and to connect with one another. But you can put it on them and ask them just to meet and introduce themselves and connect with one another. The next thing that I would recommend in creating good and organizing good teamwork is to provide guidelines on how to work in teams. As instructor, we anticipate that students know how to work in teams already, but that's not accurate assumption. Most of them, they don't. I mean, many of students just are not familiar with what effective teamwork looks like in a classroom setting. So our recommendations here, you must provide maybe just to create discussions of what effective teamwork looks like, how to get started, how do they need to talk to one another, what communication tools they can use, how many times they need to meet, how to be involved in the process. What does a good team do and what does a bad team do? And try to be transparent and explicit. The next thing I want to mention here is to and bring it up here is you must assign them a contract before the assignment begins, and reflections after the assignment. So they set up a plan with a due date, how they're gonna approach the assignment, the roles that they will assign to themselves, and how they're going to communicate with one another, and what tools they can use to communicate with one another. There are plenty of tools like Slack, WhatsApp, Google Chat, MS Team, or the emails. The last thing I would recommend here, folks, to do to provide a clear grading criteria or rubrics that evaluate their individual and their team performance. This will post the student engagement in the group project and accountability. And we're going to speak about that later. Now, so what are the tools that we can use to organize our groups? The first one is, should we start with the long term or short terms, Caroline?
Short term, I'm just having issues here.
Okay. So, all right, so.
Is it the slide previous?
The previous one, yeah. Before that, yeah.
No.
After,
it's just this
yeah.
one.
Okay, here, yeah. Yeah, go.
Okay, so for organizing short-term groups, assigning minimal roles is best, but try to avoid super administrative roles like timekeeper and recorder. Only use those if it's actually going to serve a purpose. Otherwise, you can just have someone share out at the end or someone to go first. Again, we modeled that kind of minimal roles in your groups. Here, you can assign reporters if you want groups to share out so that students don't waste maybe 1 or 2 minutes trying to figure out who's going to be the one who's going to speak, or so that a student who maybe is the most confident in that group or most likely to speak is the one who takes over. So you can use different strategies. We modeled the darkest shirt one, but any just way to randomly assign a role to someone. And you can also use numbered assignment roles for speed. So if you have 2 roles, and you have a pair, maybe role 1 is answer a question first, and role 2 is share out, and then it's just the 1 does role 1 and 2 does role 2. So just real quick.
Here are some tools to help you organize long-term projects. One activity we recommend of creating a group or creating groups in your course is the group resume. And we provided here a template, as you can see here. So basically, students fill out together a resume in which they share their skills, talent, knowledge, experiences, maybe educational background, and make visible their value to the group. And then they decide how to go from there in just approaching their group project. Another way to organize group is by using roles and the responsibility cards. We provided for you an example of different roles. Like, for example, one of them will be the timekeeper, one of them will be the president of the leader, one of them will be the one who will share out the information. As you can see here, if you click on that screenshot, it was going to take you directly to the original document if you want to use it in your classroom. Another way to organize a group is by asking them just to fill out the team contract that we mentioned before, in which they list the team members, the case study they're working on, the leader of the team name, and answer some questions that you have, how they're gonna communicate with each other, who's gonna complete which part, and how they're gonna resolve their conflicts. And the last way to organize team is by using the wheel activity example. So this is a prompt from an assignment that Caroline mentioned from an instructor here at the UM. So you can ask a student to read that assignment project and explore this topic in depth. And then each one of them will write their contribution here to that assignment.
And if I could say a little bit more about this one.
So I want to put it, keep it for you, because I know that she used this tool actually before in her class. Yeah,
it's really nice to figure out which student has a special affinity or a skill that's going to help the group. So you read the assignment prompt, and then in your space, you're sitting in a group of 4. Everyone's working on the same paper, and you write down just a reflection. I'm really interested in the audio clip part. I think I would be really good at that, but I'm not excited that we have to write. It seems like a lot of work, whatever the reflection is. And then what you do is, once everyone's reflected, you turn the paper. So the paper turns, students do not. And then students can annotate, they can respond, and it's a silent conversation that is happening. Maybe they circle and say, so glad you have experience with this. I don't have any, I'm feeling stressed out about it. And so they're just having a whole conversation about these roles, but they get to put down their opinions. Maybe the prompt asks them to choose a topic. They get to voice their opinion before maybe a more vocal member in the group voices an opinion, and everybody rallies around that idea. So it's a great way to introduce a little bit more equity into the groups organizing themselves. And so managing groups, just quickly, again, if you can norm set, either have the groups norm set on their own, or you do a whole class activity to do some norm setting so that everyone understands the expectations. Already establishing or working on establishing a positive classroom climate, that's going to leak into the success of your groups. So leaving time for groups to check in and make sure everyone's doing okay. And longer term groups, establishing really diverse roles so that students can excel at what they're good at and bring that to the group. Scaffolding, transferable skills. So those are those unseen skills of listening to others and responding to conflict that might be coming up. And then engaging with the groups, taking notes, checking in, having a pulse on how everyone's doing, working in deliverables so that you know who might not be doing what they need to be in their team before it becomes an issue. And again, having a pulse on accountability. So having enough check-ins, having enough individual assignments that are worked into the overall group project so that you can meet one-on-one with a student who might be struggling to meet expectations, and keeping that off of maybe a group leader role, because at the end of the day, that student is still a student, and the instructor should really be responding to anything that's not getting done.
And the last thing we're gonna talk about today is grading a group assignment. In general, in any team project, in any group assignment, the suggestion here is you to grade group performance, which is the product and the process. The product, which is the final, it could be the final essay, a website, a presentation, and the process as well. And that is the ability to meet the deadline, contribution fairly, or communicating effectively. Also to grade individual performance, to encourage accountability. So you can ask them what went well in the group work, what could be improved, how the group work impacted the learning experience. And I wanna suggest here also to assess group contributions to the team. So you can send them or give them graded or ungraded team assessment, and ask a student to assess their work in the group and assess the group members. I think this practice is really effective, encouraging a student to slack, I would say, to slack of less, and student will be will approach the work more and will be more accountable in performing the groups. And on the other side, it's going to give the student insight on how the team or the successful team work looks like. I think we're almost done here with our points that we're going to cover. We provided for you links with some assessment tools and some templates if you would like to use. So I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has questions about what we've talked.
Feel free to post a question in the chat if you're more comfortable that way. Awesome. So we will send out the slides with all of the resources. If you would like to meet to follow up on anything that we talked about today, we'll also include our information. Thank you so much for attending.